I want to highlight two wrong attitudes regarding financial issues in cross-cultural situations. First of all, the sense of superiority and control on one side. Now, donors want to be involved in the projects they are funding and not just blindly dole out funds. But how can we nurture such involvement without donor-designated funding becoming a leverage by which a donor controls a ministry? Some donors want to give for needs that they think the field has, without considering the donee's real needs. And so, the donor will allocate funds according to their ideas, as if they own the projects. Just another example of neo-paternalism. A donor or a Western-based organization may comment, "We need to make sure that the national church is accountable, that they know how to handle the funds." Or they talk about using the nationals for their own church planting or discipleship agendas. Now, this is destructive patronage, where the donor controls and distributes the resources in such a way that it serves the donor's own agenda. Now, the donor may not even be aware of this neo-colonial bias, but recipients of the funding feel they are simply being used by the funding agency or the home organization, who then writes sensational reports in an effort to gain more funds. Now, this sensational report writing, this seems to be a plight in all cultures, and I'll get to that in another module. Sometimes a finance officer or manager can use the need for good accounting practices simply as a mask to hide behind an attitude of superiority. And he or she will threaten, well, if we don't submit accurate finance reports, we will lose our funding, or they might shut down our ministry. This can become a powerful weapon. Get the finance report, or... Now, here are some reflective questions to consider, both for the donor and those responsible for finances. How am I, as the donor, perceived by those receiving the funds, or by those having to prepare financial reports? Another question: who sets up the processes and procedures for accounting? The Persians have a saying, "The one who gives the bread calls the shots." So, should the donor be in charge? Another question: how can the finance officer or the accountant who asks for accurate reporting relate to the on-the-ground ministry partner without this sense of superiority and control? And how about this? How can we see ourselves eating at the same table? Obviously, the food should not just be at one end of the table. We would pass the bread or rice or whatever to everyone at the table. Now, there are numerous resources in any given project. We have the donors and good finance officers. They are two great resources, but we need to take care not to overrate the wealthy philanthropist from the West or the astute finance officer and undervalue the partners on the field. All need to be esteemed and valued. Conversely, we can heroize the frontline or national worker and almost idolize them and disregard the very necessary finance officers and accountants. Another wrong attitude is to think that asking questions is not appropriate. Sometimes there can be a reaction against this emphasis of good accounting practices. People can play a cultural game of woe is us mentality from the colonial period. That Western finance officer, all he wants is to control us. Nothing has changed. Now, people can easily accuse those who ask questions as if they're trying to control and make life difficult. This is seen as reversed colonial bias. And the desire for indigenous independence then becomes a mask to hide behind laziness and incompetence in preparing reports. Sometimes people harbor a deep, bitter spirit and see any effort at due diligence and good accounting policies simply as another form of paternalism. Or sometimes people give knee-jerk reactions. We are busy. All this reporting is such a bother. I don't have documents for everything. And so we postpone doing the books. We leave it to the end of the month, or we delay it into the next month because it feels like we're just wasting our time. I've got to prepare a Bible lesson or do this project and so forth. And then, to make it worse, headquarters or the home office or maybe the finance officer ask for more information, for another document. Really? You want another receipt? But here's the key principle. Good fiscal management takes time, effort, and energy, and it's part of our spiritual service. And just as practitioners on the field don't enjoy dealing with receipts, documenting their finances, donors and accountants do not necessarily enjoy this either, although it's their profession and they're skilled at doing this. They do what they do because laws require them to do so, and this is their job description. And the reality is that more and more governments in global South countries are requiring strong fiscal documentation as well. So healthy financial practices and good accountability do not come from a sense of superiority or neocolonialism or twisted patronage. It is unfair to assume this, and it hurts cross-cultural relationships to think this way. Let's go on to this activity and look at these three persons involved in ministry. We have the donor, the finance officer, and the project manager.